And good evening and welcome to In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. I'm Eric Marsh, Executive Director of WCTV. Glad you're able to join us for this, we normally say special 90-minute, but we're doing so many of them, they're not special anymore. But for this 90-minute In Focus program, yes, we are on the air, and if you've been watching WGTV this week, you realize that a lot of programming has not been. We have been under maintenance for most of this week for our video server. So this is a sign that you've seen as part of our government bulletin board this week. Our video server is undergoing maintenance. It has taken all week. We hope to have it back up by sometime on Saturday afternoon. We're running the bulletin board, we're running Total Info, and we're able to do some live programming. So as you saw a little while ago, we were able to bring you the live Board of Public Works and Safety meeting, and we are able to bring you this live In Focus program. We will not have a replay tonight at 10:30, but again, we will get this program up on our video on demand, WGTV on Live, as quickly as we can tomorrow. This is also the first time that we're able to do a Facebook Live program, so that is out there this evening. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, welcome. And want to get into this program because we have a lot of people in the room, should get a lot of interesting information, so this will be good. And yes, you can join in on this, 973-8587. You can send us an email, wctv@wctv.info, or send your question via Twitter @WCTVinfo. The guest list just said members of the Richmond Common Council. We have Kelly Cruz Nicholson, Jeff Locke, Bruce Whistle, Misty Hollis, Gary Turner, Jamie Lopeman, and Ron Oler, and thank you all for agreeing to be with us this evening. Doug Goss was unable to make it with us, and happy anniversary to Clay Miller and his wife. He had a choice, spend 90 minutes hanging out with me or spend 90 minutes with the missus for their anniversary, and she won, as she should have.
As she should, that's right.
We're going to start by really kind of turning this one to you, since you are currently the president of the Richmond Common Council. We've had a number of people that have moved into the area over the last couple of years, whether for work, school, whatever, and as you know, local governments don't all work the same way everywhere you go. The councils don't do all the same things. So why don't you give us a little primer on what the Richmond Common Council actually does and what you all's function is before we get into some of the questions.
Well, I'll also defer to everybody else if they want to pipe in.
Go for it.
Yeah, I will, but I'll start us off. Richmond is what Indiana is known as a second-class city, and within the second-class city structure, the mayor is the administrator of the city of Richmond. Our common council is very much what we call the legislative branch of the city of Richmond. Make it as simple as possible for people. So we do oversee the approval of the budget, managing of the expenses if it's not within the budget that we have appropriated or approved. And then when we talk about legislative matters, zoning, planning, those are all brought to us as well. So we are not the day-to-day manager of the city of Richmond. That's what our mayor does. Mr. Locke was on council in Connorsville, and the structure in Connorsville is very different. What's the structure in Connorsville?
As you talked about Richmond being a second-class city, Connorsville is a third-class city. So in Connorsville, you have 7 councilmen and a mayor. The mayor is the executive and the council is the legislative. But in a third-class city, the mayor runs the council meetings, where here at Richmond,
he's almost a guest at you all's meetings.
Yeah, the president runs the council meetings. Well, in Connorsville and other third-class cities, the mayor runs the meeting and has the power to break a tie vote.
Okay. So it is different. I mean, you have first-class cities, which is more like Indianapolis. I think Evansville.
That's it.
No, there's only one.
There's only one first class. So there's and that really is based on your city population as well. When you reach to a certain level of population is when you can make it. I think the citizens get the chance to vote if you're moving to the second-class city, and so that's how our structure is.
Okay. I'm going to start with some old business, and it actually came up kind of in the pre-discussion here without meaning to. I tried to hide my questions. I'm not sure who got my list.
I felt the vibes.
But a year and a half or so ago, a citizen, Nick Wilson, I believe, was asking about being able to speak at council meetings about things that maybe weren't necessarily on the agenda. Richmond Community Schools has a time where citizens can make a statement. They don't get answers back, but people are able to make a statement. I think they actually have 2 times during their meetings that they can do that. Wayne County Council also has time where people can do that during their council meetings and their council commissioners workshop. That's not something that has happened. I think it was being taken under advisement. A couple of you all were not on the council at that time, but for those of you who were and for those new, should the citizens have a chance to speak to you all, a time that's carved out where citizens' comments can be made? And is that something that you all would talk about, have thought about talking about, talked about and discarded? Where does it stand? And I don't care who starts.
You want me to talk?
Wait, you can
Go.
talk.
It came up when I was council president 2 years ago. and
Okay.
I looked at what some other cities have done. Richmond is perfectly legal in the way we do it now, that citizens have a right to speak when an ordinance is on second reading or public hearing, and that's where we really want their input, is at that time. And that's all the law really requires us to do. We could add a public comment time, as other cities have done, with a card system where you sign up, and the only problem is that we had, and we never got past this, is if we set aside a block of time and say 15 minutes at the end, and we have a card system before the meeting, which is what most of the cities I looked at do, citizen will fill out a card, say they want to talk about this, but if we get too many citizens filling out cards, then we would ask the presiding officer, the council president, to decide who gets to speak. So it does become very politicized, and that could cause maybe more problems, I don't know. Some of the cities has reported that it's has. So we tabled it for a time, and I don't know if this council is interested in talking about it again and coming up with a good plan. But every city that I talked to had just a 15-minute window, and each citizen was limited to, I think, 3 minutes was the average, not even 5 minutes. But that's kind of where we ended up was, and then we had an election, so we knew some people were changing, and we just wanted to see what everybody thought with the new council and the new mayor, and we haven't talked about it since then, really.
Right.
So now we're into a new year, maybe we should talk about it.
Sure.
Well, I was president last year, and of course, any request comes, has to go through the president. And I certainly turned down more than I accepted. And the reason for that is, I try to look at what the function of the council is. What can we consider what's within our realm of responsibilities? And most of the requests that I got were, I actually suggested they go to other departments and other agencies. A lot that they want to complain about is something that the state supervises or something the county supervises. You have a few instances where they just want to get up and talk about their neighbor. Or they want to get up and tell you about the big fundraiser their church is having. I don't see us as the venue for that. If it's something where they need to talk to the redevelopment commission, that's where it should be addressed. Or if they have something that they feel very seriously should be addressed, it should go to their district council person or their at-large person, and let them decide if this is something that's within our preview or not.
Any other thoughts? Nope. Okay. Each of you are elected by people within an area or the city. You talked about district, talked about at large, with obviously the 3 at-large members being here, Misty, Jamie, Ron Oler. And the prosperity of the city obviously is important to all of you all. The mayor has chosen as one of his focus areas workforce development. He was here on an In Focus in December, and he talked a little bit about how he got to that point. So if we can play that clip real quick.
I found a gap. As I would go out and talk to people within the city, and I would say, what are your expectations of me? You've hired me to do a job. What do you want to see out of that job? And they would often say, bring more jobs here. And I'd say, well, tell me, where's it lacking? What's wrong? And they would say, I can't find this, I can't find that. I apply and I'm turned down. I need more opportunities. When I would talk to the managers, the hirers, the business owners, they'd say, we have a lot of openings that we're not able to fill because there's a skills gap and there are problems. And so I started seeing less of a lack of opportunities and more of a gap in resource connection.
Talk to me a little bit about that focus for the mayor, do you think it is one that the city should be focusing on? And I know as an administrator, he's looking at some things maybe that you all aren't. But workforce development is something that in a number of conversations, even when we've had some of you all in here as candidates, has come up and has just kind of driven the conversation a little bit. So as a body for the city, is that a correct focus? And how can you all as a body help push that focus if it is?
I think it's a very appropriate focus. As to what we can do to push it, we can only budget for it and support it through council meetings and talk about it. But I think, as we've made clear, we're the legislative body and really don't have a role in administering a program of that sort. But personally, I think he's on the right track when he focuses on developing the workforce.
So basically, I've been kind of a champion on this. I've been talking with superintendents, I've been talking to other manufacturers and other leaders in the community. And the overriding theme that you hear is that we have resources that we're not pulling together. So his last statement holds a lot of water. In the near future, I'm arranging a meeting to actually sit down as a citizen and talk to these people, get them get them at the table and say, look, we have an obvious issue here. You have resources, you're doing your thing, you're doing your thing. How do we pull this together and start the communication in a positive way? Soft skills are huge. As a manufacturer I work at, we have 600 employees. We struggle to find employees, and actually we have, I think, about 40 openings right now. And it's just the soft skills of getting people in the door. Can they show up to work? Can they take direction? Can they raise their hand when there's a problem? Basic math, basic reading, everything that you need for an employee, because an employer can train anybody within 2 weeks if they're willing to get on board. So we got to get out of this fiefdom, and I can't let you play in my yard and you can't play in this yard. We all have to be on the same page.
As someone who works in the community with families every day, and I'm going to take off my city council hat, you know, I think that this is a very good focus for the mayor. And the reason I say that is because I talk with people every day who say we don't have job opportunities in Richmond. And it's not so much that there aren't job opportunities, it's like Mr. Lopman said, you know, the skill set is what we're looking at. And I teach a couple of classes. I teach a lot of classes, but I do teach a few classes in Richmond. Some of the things that we talk about are how to dress for an interview. Not only how to get a job, but how do you maintain that job? How do you stay there and retain your employment? You know, unfortunately, there are so many people that feel like they can just put it in an application and, you know, go any way they want to an interview or not know what the employer expects. Unfortunately, we have no one's using paper applications anymore, which also makes it more difficult, because if you don't have someone who has that computer knowledge to go and surf the net and find the web page they need to go to and fill out the application, it gets very frustrating, and people tend to then just give up. They just are just like, well, that's probably not suited for me. And I think that it is important, and I do look at it in a different, I look at it differently than Mr. Lopman does. You know, he's an employer, and you know, he's looking at these employees every day, and as someone who is in the trenches, so to speak, with folks in the community, you know, I hear some of the things that they say. You know, transportation is a big issue too. Huge. It's huge. If they don't have transportation, you're not going to apply for a job that's on the west side of town, and you know, you live on the east side when you have no way to get there. You know, I dealt with someone just recently who got a job. The job was near Meyer, and they had no transportation to get from the far south side to their place of employment. I provided transportation many times, but you know, we can't do it forever, and so they ultimately ended up quitting. Another thing that holds families, and I'm speaking from a family perspective, another thing that holds families back is childcare. Childcare is very expensive, and when you're a single mother trying to support your family and you have 2 children that have to go to daycare, so to speak, you can't afford, it's almost easier to not work and take care of your children at home than to put them in daycare, because, you know, daycare can cost you anywhere from, you know, $50 to $150 a week per child. It just depends on where they're going to daycare at. So I think that there are definitely, as a community, that we need to look at. Like, you know, Mr. Turner said, we are the legislative body. I understand that. But as a community, we need to look at the folks that we have. We have people here who have skills, okay, and just knowing where to place them. They're not being placed in the right positions. And, you know, not everyone is qualified to, you know, work in a business building, you know, and so it makes it a little more difficult, but that's where I'm at.
Well, your original question, I think, was, is that part of the city responsibility? And I think when you look at the amount of time and the amount of money that city government now spends in promoting business and opportunities for growth, you know, we have tax abatement, we have the revolving loan fund, we zoning, we do a lot of accommodations in order to meet that. We appropriated a lot of money to be able to build the roads for Blue Buffalo to come in. So it enhances the investment that we already make if we can have a ready workforce. I think the last figures I saw, the unemployment rate's only like 4.6% in Wayne County. And in the horizon, we've got Blue Buffalo is 165 jobs. Omen's expanding. When Sugar Creek gets going, even though it's 15 miles away, there's going to be a lot of those people that are going to live here, and others that will shop here from the Cambridge City area that picks that as home. So yes, we do have an investment there and a need to take care of that. Now, our primary focus on that has been with our inclusion with the Economic Development Commission. They've got the expertise with that, and a lot of times when we're in the process of providing, say, a tax abatement, they're supplementing that with additional training grants. And we also look at the state as a partner there. So their role may be more visible, but we do contribute to that and do help to make that part of the success.
As the legislative body that you all keep reminding me that you are, can you all push some of that? Kelly just mentioned the fact that transportation is an issue for a lot of people in this community. As you're looking at budgeting time and talking to Roseview Transit, can you throw out the idea, have you looked at increasing, or we might consider spending more money to increase certain bus lines during certain times or things of that nature? Is that within you all's role and something that you think maybe it's time to begin to happen?
I think it is. I think we as a council can push things, if nothing else, just with our collective input, you know, to help drive the EDC or help drive the county or the state, let them know what our concerns are. I think that is an important part of our responsibilities to help drive these issues.
And I think, and I do agree, I think we do have a place that our voice can be heard on behalf of citizens in Richmond or businesses that they wouldn't have the time or the opportunity to reach out to a state senator or a state representative that represents us, and we should make sure that we are representing them in that aspect of it. But I think data is really important. I think making sure, when we start talking about the needs around this topic, making sure the data is there, and I know it is there, but I agree with Mr. Loatman, it's in different pots, it's in different silos. Yeah. And ensuring that when and if we do have this conversation, or even if it's at budget time, that we are looking at the data, and that and I'll give you an example. Reed Hospital just released a health needs assessment. Well, that's not only about Richmond, but it's their service area, and ensuring when we're looking at the needs, and child care has come up in that. United Way has done a study that is reflective of they're considered working, but still in poverty families in Richmond, Indiana. And with child care being a part of that, cost of living as far as renting, I mean, you have to look at the data. I mean, we have a lot of families that if they're renting, it's almost better for them to buy a home. It's more expensive for them to rent. And so there's just a lot of information around it, and having collective conversations around it. From a legislative perspective, you are correct. We can use this as an opportunity once or twice part of our budgeting conversations to make that happen.
You know, Eric, one thing that's been very interesting and very apparent is that as you talk to an Ivy Tech, as you talk to a Richmond High School, as you talk to Purdue, it's the engagement and enabling at a younger age to get kids involved, students involved with a program that brings them into a vocational or a technology type situation. And, you know, the feedback has been, let's get down to the 5th grade. You know, because the time we get to the high school, you know, we have patterns, we have, you know, mindsets, and we need to work collectively together to engage and enable.
I want to go back to something Mr. Whistle brought up when he talked about the Economic Development Commission. There was a meeting.
Are we talking about commission or corporation?
Corporation.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure.
Yep, Economic Development Corporation. There was a meeting, I don't know, 6-7 weeks ago, somewhere along those lines. The 3 at-large council members were there. The mayor was there, Beth Fields, Ken Poust, Wayne County Commissioner President. You have the smile on your face.
I do have a smile on my face.
Pete Zaleski, Wayne County Council President. The mayor, I was kind of a fly on the wall without a camera for once, actually. Although when it was over, I was going, I should have had one. Talking about economic development, the money that Richmond puts into that pot that is used to fund the Economic Development Corporation, I kind of got the feeling, it's just not really knowing what to expect when I walked into the room and listening to the conversation, that part of it was about Richmond maybe taking more control of the money either that it expends for the Economic Development Corporation or keeping some of its own money to do some of its own economic development things. For those of you that were there, tell me whether I'm on or off base and how that conversation has continued, because the decision was being made as to what Richmond would do as far as whether they would put in the amount that they had been in previous years or, like Mayor Hutton had done for a couple of years, cut that figure by a little bit. Where does that stand, and where do you all believe Richmond's economic development dollars should be going right now?
I can start with history, and Mr. Whistle's part of this too. I mean, when it was decided and it was proposed that those living in Richmond would participate in the edit tax, which means we have a portion of our income that is taken away from the taxpayer, and it's put into an edit fund that we have at the City of Richmond. When it was determined that to have this edit tax, we agreed as the City of Richmond at the time that we would take 50% of those dollars collected, would turn it over to Wayne County government, and they would administer those dollars on our behalf. So they receive 50% of that. $700,000?
Yes.
About a year is what has been between that. I mean, it's been given to the county. So this is the time where we've been asked to sign that agreement, and actually I shouldn't say we. The mayor has that sole authority and sole decision to decide whether those dollars will be sent across the street to the county. I did, I think a few of us felt it would be a good time to talk about, should we sign a 4-year agreement or should we sign a 2-year agreement? And so it really came to the mayor to make that decision. He felt he needed to have an open conversation, and he invited county council in and county commissioners in and a few of us in and the public to hear how those dollars have been spent in the past, to have open dialogue, which is what that meeting was. It was an open dialogue conversation, and my understanding is he has made a decision, and he will be bringing that to us on Monday as a resolution, I guess I applaud him a little bit. He doesn't have to do that. I mean, he doesn't. This really is his decision. And even this week I talked to him and said, just reminding you, you're doing this, you might not have unanimous support when you ask us to vote on this, because it's a resolution and he's just being kind, I guess. It's a kind gesture for him to bring it to us. But it is his decision. We do appropriate those dollars once a year. So that would be the one time, if we wanted to take a stand as a council, we could do it at that time. But at this particular time, it's his decision, because we've already appropriated those dollars for him to do that. Anybody else want to add?
You know, and I think very much to the mayor's credit, he has been good about bringing things up for discussion, and it's important to have that. I believe in a collective EDC. You know, I've seen other counties where the local towns just keep it all, and it seems like never anything ever gets done because it gets spent for other infrastructure uses and things that really doesn't benefit the EDC. I think we have one of the contiguous counties here that's one of the best examples of ineffective economic development in the state. There is an importance in how we spend those EDC dollars, and when you look at many of the expenses that we have coming up, the Old Reed Hospital, for instance, that's going to be a major expenditure. We're going to have to find some new development land. We're almost out. And that's going to fall on the responsibility of the city, which will then give to EDC. So because that's the way it has to be done in most cases. So whether we write out a check to the EDC for 50% or whether we contribute by making purchases like future commercial development land, you know, I think we're still committed to that concept of carrying our own weight in this.
And I guess I do just want to make sure people understand the dollars go to the county. The county then signs the agreement with Economic Development Corporation, and county council is managing those dollars for us. So our relationship, the relationship that the mayor will sign as far as an agreement, will be between the city and the county. The county's already committed 4 years to the Economic Development Corporation to manage our economic development.
But the city is the largest contributor.
It is.
To the edit.
Absolutely. If you combine, and that was clear that night.
Right. Well, the city's also been, since this was founded, cumulatively the largest recipient of those funds too. We have more industrial parks and more employers in the city than we do in the county, thanks to those funds. So that dialogue that night, I think, opened up some conversations we hadn't had in a while.
Well, but I would push back a little bit on that. I mean, they still kept $1 million of it. I mean, you know, we didn't get the complete return on investment,
No.
I think, to the city of Richmond. And so.
Well, one of the problems is the EDC of Wayne County is fully funded by taxpayers. And other cities, that's not necessarily the case. So the money we give to the county funds the EDC, their operations, plus builds in a community fund for community projects, which we can, by agreement, if they will, help fund projects just for the city. But I think historically, because the city is, you know, we kept our 50%, we have a nice little fund built up too. Not enough to take care of Old Reed now. We need help from the county because city taxpayers are county taxpayers. So when we take care of the Old Reed property, it needs to be a city-county joint project. But so Sugar Creek's there. Omen Casting is going to hire 100. Blue Buffalo. We have a lot of good jobs coming in. Unemployment rate's low. So in our conversations with the mayor just a couple weeks ago about this, our fund next should be workforce development, as you started the program with a little while ago. Do we need more industrial land, more spaces? We have a few acres left. We don't have any big acreage left because Blue Buffalo took up the largest part of the biggest acreage we had left. There is some land available. We've talked about purchasing some more land, but honestly, with unemployment the way it is, and enough unfilled jobs coming on board in the next 2 years, probably about 400 of them for the city county, our focus now should be getting people ready and filled into those jobs, not necessarily buying more land. So that might be the wiser place to spend our money, is on helping getting these people prepared. I don't know, as a professor at the community college next door, the biggest problem we have is, like what Kelly said, is childcare. We have a Roseview transit system, which works pretty well. I know several years ago they ran second shift to some of the factories and had almost no ridership. So Terry cut that off after a time. They ran until 10 o'clock at night and nobody was using it, so it was pointless to have that expense. Maybe that needs to be revisited now that the economy's changed since the Great Recession. Maybe there are more people that don't have cars, so we should revisit the Roseview question. Should we have more transportation, more buses, more routes? Should we partner with the county for transportation all the way out to Sugar Creek, out on Road 1? Maybe that's something we need to look at. So we need to educate a workforce, we need to train workforce, we need to fill the skills gap, we need to fix Old Reed, it's our biggest eyesore, but I'm not so sure that we need to buy any more land right now because we're going to struggle to fill the openings we have.
Well,
I
guess I would piggyback a little bit too to what Mr. Whistle said, because and that's one of the reasons I would still prefer signing a 2-year agreement with Wayne County government versus a 4-year agreement. We will not have the freedom to look in the next 2 years to say how do we have these resources and can we hold on to some of these resources to make a bigger impact for our city in a different way maybe. There's a nice cash balance on the county side in that edit fund, and for us right now I think we need to have a collective conversation of what, with the mayor, he has a priority he has said is Reed. He has said that publicly several times. And workforce development, he has said, is a big priority to him. But we've not talked about that from a financial issue and what that means. And I'm hoping that we will be able to have a work session or some open dialogue between council and the mayor. We've not had that. I think we've each individually had conversations with him about those two topics, but collectively we haven't. And I don't even know what the financial need is for Old Reed. I don't. But we, every day, look at unsafe houses and we declare them unsafe and we do things with those houses like tear them down. Yet we have one of the biggest unsafe facilities in the city of Richmond and we haven't taken responsibility for that. And I think we just can't keep pushing that away any longer. I think we have to address it and I think we have to talk about it, and that's why I was uncomfortable and still am uncomfortable with signing a 4-year agreement with the county, those dollars.
You just said that you all haven't had, and that was actually, reading my notes.
I'm
One of the
not.
questions,
I'm feeling the
what
vibe.
have been, obviously the conference, and the mayor has been here on 2 or 3 occasions. He has talked about the old Reed building and the fact that that needs to come down. I think it was Mr. Oler just said that will kind of be a city-county
partnership, it has
partnership that has to be. Council President Pete Zaleski sat there about 6 weeks ago on an In Focus program and basically said, right now it's a city problem. So with it being a city problem or it being a city-county problem, what is the dialogue that has gone on, not just with the mayor, who has said he's looking at it and working on it every day. You're smiling, you're not. How does that dialogue between the city and the county and the legislative body here and the mayor begin? Because the citizens are tired of hearing about it. They're tired of seeing it. I'll say I was in Bloomington a couple of months ago, and I had somebody mention it to me down there who doesn't live here, who had just traveled through the city, and it was, hey, what's with that old building? So how does it begin? How does the needle get moved?
So I think as a progressive group, we need to look at all options. Obviously, it's been up like 10 years. 10 years it's been basically abandoned.
Gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, there are other models throughout the country that are easily reviewable for benchmarking that show endowments that you can get by, reallocating assets. We can also look at the typical way, which is, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to talk to the state, we're going to talk to other entities and try to get that money. Unfortunately, I think that's another 10 plus years in the making. It's a 20-year building sitting there. We get calls nightly, people are in the building. We endanger our law enforcement officers to go out there and clean them out of the building. And guess what? There's no penalty for them being in the building. So we need to, I think as a group, we need to look at, you know, number one, making sure that building is secure. And if that means fining, I understand you have to have the owner for trespassing, but we need to come up with some creative ways of keeping people out of the building, number one. And number two, I think we just have to be open to all ideas and put them on the table and discuss them intelligently and try to come up with the fastest, most economical way that doesn't impact our citizens.
Well, a couple observations about that. We have talked about the expense. We don't know what the expense is, and when I say we've talked about it at redevelopment. And we anticipate that it's going to be an expense that's going to be primarily the city's to bear, although we hope to have the county involved. But at this point, I believe we're still waiting for the results of testing, soil testing out there, and a complete disclosure of what exactly is out there that has to be dealt with. And that's where you know, who knows what it's going to cost to remediate that site.
Yeah, remediation is what, $3 to $4 a square foot?
It's terrible.
And it's like 675,000 square feet, so.
And it's not easy to do. It's a long-term problem. You know, if today we decided we're going to take down Reed, I would guess it'd be 5 years before we were able to actually get it off the books.
Right.
Does that make you feel better?
By the way, that's why I wasn't smiling.
A couple of years ago, IDEM was here at a meeting when Tony Foster was still the Director of Metropolitan Development. They gave us a report on the environmental hazards and what we need to do to remediate that. And we looked at it and got a little bit scared. The EPA is willing to give a zero-interest loan, but the EPA won't fund it as a brownfield site. And they won't even do that until the city or county or somebody else has a deed to the property, which we haven't done. It's still privately owned. It's been declared somewhat unsafe because we're allowed to go in there and clean up some things and remediate some parts of it, and we patrol it, police and fire. But we don't own it yet, neither the city nor the county. And until that happens, we really can't take the next step, other than we can do the environmental analysis, and there's one coming. There's another one coming, I guess, and we'll know more some of the pollutants out there, contaminants, and what the cost is there. But a couple of years ago was $2 to $4 million for the environmental cleanup, and another 4 to 6 to tear it down, and another $1 million or so to make it a shovel-ready site, if you will. So it was quite expensive a couple of years ago, and I'm sure that's only increased.
We've been through this process
Right.
several times on the Wayne Works building.
Right.
RP&L has had some things.
And we're still on the
And-
PC, Purvis Circle
PC,
Dana
yeah,
building, right?
Dana
Which-
building.
We can actually finally, I think, sell items, clear that, haven't they?
And
That would help.
It is a very frustrating project when you're dealing with the environmental management groups, whether it's IDEM or EPA, and you know, they'll go months between delays. And when we get done with that, we're going to have to get some kind of assurance from IDEM or EPA that whoever buys that property is going to have a limitation on how much pollution coverage they can be sued for. I mean, it's pretty hard to sell a piece of property that's still up in the air on that. And that's just kind of a cat and mouse game with the regulators.
First step is for somebody to own the property. At this
Yes.
point, nobody seems to want to take control of it. I'm hearing that there is some consensus that the city is going to be the one that's going to have to step up and do that.
Well,
I
but at
think
one
so.
planning meeting, I think
I think
the
so.
city would create a nonprofit to take it over. So they could apply for some of these grants and loans.
There hasn't been, and I mean, I have a meeting with the mayor tomorrow, and it's on my agenda to request this, but there has not been a time that I know of that as city council, we have sat down with the mayor and the mayor's administration, and not this mayor, even the previous one, to really look at everything. I mean, what are the facts? What's our timeline? What's been done? What hasn't been done? And work together on what that needs to look like, because it's going to be a financial hardship on us, and I think we have to start talking about that now, especially, and I know the mayor feels the same way, but there just hasn't been any collective conversation together, and that's my request on my agenda tomorrow to talk to him about, that we need to have a work session with council and him and his team to talk about what has been done, timelines, how we need to move forward at this point.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Members of the Richmond Common Council nice enough to sit in with us for 90 minutes. You can get in on this conversation. Give us a call, 973-8587. Send us an email, wctv@wctv.info, or send your question via Twitter @WCTV-info. We're talking about the Reed building right now, and there's 2 or 3 pieces that could come up from that. So we'll go to kind of the next one. Representative Tom Saunders has introduced a bill at the State House that would allow first a county, and if the county didn't do it, then a municipality, to put a fee on some property that is owned by not-for-profit organizations. We all talked about, again, when some of you all were in here as candidates, the idea of a pilot program, and that is something that basically that's what he's putting together and maybe giving you all an option to be able to do. Craig Kenyon, president of and CEO of Reed, was here last week. I asked him about this particular topic coming up. This was his answer to that.
Where we come back time and time again is to show what we're giving back over and above our tax break. In other words, what do we do as an organization to give back to the community in free care? I mentioned about dental care a little bit ago. It goes well beyond that. We have a lot of dollars in what we call assistance to the poor or charity care, and we give away dollars for free care that comes through the hospital, those folks that present to the emergency room, that have a crisis or a gigantic health need that creeps up and end up being admitted or require additional care afterwards. And we allow those patients to apply for charity care. That's, again, another thing Sherry does as well. And then we have the folks that are on Medicaid, and a large portion of what their costs are not covered by the Medicaid program. We actually get paid below cost by Medicaid, which is better than getting paid nothing.
Sure.
But those dollars also become part of our burden for the dollars that we put back into the community. And then we have coordination of other programs with other programs throughout the entire community that we don't own, but we fund into. Some of those could be United Way agencies and different programs that are doing health-related needs. And we publish that information frequently when we run full-page ads to show the community this is what we give back to the community. That's our payment in lieu of tax that goes well beyond our tax. I'm not sure there's a lot of other organizations that are doing that to this level that Reed is. So we will gladly discuss this openly with anybody that would like to look at the data.
As candidates, it was all somewhat hypothetical. Now a state legislator has at least put the idea on the table. Is it something that you all would consider, and have you, since everybody knows the legislation is out there, considered what that would look like? Mr. Kenyon made a great point. They do a lot in the community. Are you looking for an organization to do what they're doing and just be a good corporate citizen? Would you be looking for monies particularly to go toward police, fire, sanitation, those things that most of those organizations would use? Obviously, churches would be exempt from in his bill. Have you thought at all about what this might look like for the city, considering the amount of property that is not being taxed, and you're just talking about the monies that the city is going to need to do some big projects in the future?
Well, you know, this isn't the first time Representative Saunders has sponsored this bill. It's been there several years before, and I think this year he's finally maybe getting some more notice to it or traction with it. So, you know, it still has to clear Indianapolis, so I don't think anybody's holding their breath at this point. But if it does pass, then I think we need to sit down and work on a plan on what we want to do if the county doesn't adopt it.
If they don't adopt it, is this a conversation that maybe you all believe you need to have with individual corporate citizens that fall into that somewhat larger not-for-profit realm?
I would hope we would take a reasoned, rational approach to this. And
Right.
if a nonprofit like Reed is contributing this much money to the community already and another nonprofit isn't, then the other nonprofit who is using our police and fire protection services, we should send them a bill. But we would have to measure what are they doing, what are they not doing. And I just hope we take a rational, reasoned approach if this bill passes.
Well, yeah, we do need to commend a lot of the nonprofit organizations that do contribute a lot to this community.
Yes.
Everybody recognizes that, and that's not really the issue that's up for discussion. You know, the police, the fire service, roads, those are all something that we have an investment in, and it's all something that is an expense that the city bears. You know, what you don't want to get in the situation where you're trying to evaluate who contributes the most and try to base a fee or anything like that. When we did the wastewater program and we established separate fees, we did that to get around the tax issues of nonprofits. Even the city pays for that. You know, we're just going to have to look to be able to maintain the level of service that we've got and be able to offer improvements. The money's going to have to come from somewhere, and we're really limited in where we can turn to get it.
So the simple question is, what would they do if we didn't offer it to them? They would pay for it, right? Pretty simple. They'd pay for trash pickup. They would pay for those type services. So I actually support the bill, what he's trying to do, the legislation that he's trying to work on, and I told him that if I could help him in any way, please contact me. So that's my standpoint on it.
Another place where money maybe or may not be would be in what's abated to various companies. There are some great corporate citizens in the Richmond area. I've kind of watched at the back of the room for a number of years as tax abatements have come through. They have been turned down periodically, but it's pretty rare. You have expressed, I think, some concern as to the abatements that are being given. Is it time for this body to begin to look at what constitutes a good abatement, what constitutes a good wage for an abatement, considering the fact that, again, we're talking about unemployment is low, more jobs coming in? Is that another way that some things need to be looked at, and is that on you all's agenda for this year to consider what a tax abatement should look like for a corporation, how long, how much, and again, particularly, what that wage level looks like for the citizens of Richmond?
And that is something that we're looking at. The abatement committee is meeting tomorrow with Valerie Schaefer of the EDC and Phil D'Amico of the Chamber. And we're reviewing the current ordinances that we have and at least want to get their idea on what their groups see as important. In theory, tax abatement shouldn't really be a cost to the community. What you're doing is, you know, if someone's making an improvement or bringing in new equipment, their current tax level is, or assessment is going to be the same. And the addition of the equipment or building that's being added, we are just going to delay the full taxation of the new portion. So you're not taking anything away from what you're getting at that point. If it's a 10-year abatement, the first year you're not getting any new taxes, but the second year you're getting 10% and 20%. And it's a way to help subsidize the investment to the company so they can afford to put in the equipment or make the expansion, which will allow them to grow, and we will get the benefit of that future taxable assessment there from that addition. I do think this is something, I got a list of all the abatements that we've had concerning taxes since 1984 when the state started allowing it. And this has been a continuous motion. You know, it's changed, I don't know, probably 15 or more times have we addressed this. And we brought it up to handle different situations that occurred. There's one that has to deal with the downtown ordinance and building up your downtown, because that was originally excluded from the abatement option, or most of the occupancies, the mercantile offices, things of that nature. We also got one that we call the dinosaur abatement, and that's for buildings that really just need a revamp, and they're of a certain industrial size, and rather than a building like the Wayne Works going to pot, we will help them by not taxing them for the improvements they make until and on a graduated basis. And we have got a kind of a monster abatement, a special abatement for those projects that are coming in and bringing a lot of new jobs and a lot of new investment dollars, and we're just looking at those differently, and they can get more than that standard 10% addition a year. That's what's going to help the business community grow and the city grow by doing that. But I forgot the original question,
Well,
but yes,
I want to
we
say
were looking at that.
I appreciate Mr. Whistle having this conversation, and I'm real excited about our new chamber president, Phil D'Amico, because he comes to us from South Bend, and his role at the chamber up there, he worked with the city of Richmond as a partner with representing the businesses to say, okay, we know that the city of Richmond, the city of South Bend, and St. Joe County needs some better flexibility in the abatement process. And I think they kind of they tweaked things a little bit, and one of those that intrigued me was waiting for the abatement to kick in a year after it's approved. And I think I'm hoping that's one of the things that they talk about tomorrow. Instead of granting it kind of in advance, you wait and let them prove that they created the jobs that they said they would do. Right now, what we have is a report that they have to complete and issue to the city of Richmond to justify and show that they created the job, and then we review that. Tax Abatement Committee reviews those reports, lets us know if a company did not adhere to what they said they would do. And help me understand, that would mean that then if they did not commit the jobs that they said they would do, we could hold? If we find that a company hasn't done what they said they would do?
Well, you do have the enabling legislation that the state does put some restriction on that.
Okay.
We're allowed to look at a business that did not meet their commitment.
Okay.
We can take that abatement away if we can, if we feel reasonably sound that the reason it wasn't done was because of a downturn in the economy or a downturn in that particular industry. So if it was a question of a national company coming in, we gave them a huge abatement, and they started putting jobs in Detroit instead of Richmond and didn't make their commitment, then we would have the freedom to do that. But in 2008, 2009, when our unemployment was nearing double digit and nobody was investing, a lot of those operations did not meet the obligation during that time period. And we didn't take action on it because we knew what the economy was, what the situation was. And as long as we've got new investment in those buildings, we know when the economy picks up, there's the opportunity for the company to grow, and not the location that they have in Detroit or Philadelphia. So yes, we do have to conform to the state regulation on that, and also there's some. You're going to use some common sense in your application of it.
Councilman Whistle can confirm this, but I believe you also review those annually, correct?
Yes. They provide a statement of benefits, and they're not going to exaggerate on it because they have to pay taxes on what they're doing. But we do check those. Last 2 years, we've had our own committee of the whole meeting where we discussed the ones that didn't meet the objectives, and sometimes it was one or two jobs. As we had one industry that we know that they're what they buy, the value, which is salvage, went down by as much as 50% in some areas. So yes, they're going to see a decrease there, and that's that was unforeseen, and we're going to stick by him on those.
What is the concern that you've had, that you've expressed, actually mentioned to the mayor on a couple of different occasions during meetings, that he needs to maybe get a feel for where those dollars are and what is being abated?
Well, it sounds like Mr. Whistle's asked this question and he has the data, so I'm interested in seeing it. But I mean, what is that number? I mean, what are we giving up in taxes every year, or what are we not receiving that we could be receiving? And you know, we've tax abated technology for a bank. We've tax abated technology for Wolverine, which has proven to be very beneficial as far as the company growth here for us. They've been a great community partner. I feel like they've done what they said they would do, and I think the bank will too. Finance Systems received, I think, a technology grant abatement as well, and property abatement. You just kind of get to the point. Okay, so where's our? I mean, what are we going to not do? I mean, I feel like anybody can come to us at this point and say, I'm buying new equipment, technology equipment, can I get it abated? And I know there's some state standards there, but I don't feel like we have the right almost to say no anymore. And so I don't know if that's something we collectively have to decide where our boundary is and where our line is. But I am pleased to know that Mr. Whistle and the Abatement Committee are meeting with the Chamber representative and the EDC representative about it. Because it is a tool, it is an economic development tool. I know that. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's not. It is. And I know they need as many tools to attract businesses as they can. So it's not that I want to take that away, but at this point I have felt when we say, oh, well, we've got tax caps and we need more money to do this and we need more money to do that, are we really looking at our own resources and how to properly manage it?
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WCTV Channel 11. We're down to probably about our last half hour or so. We've got members of the Richmond Common Council here: Kelly Cruz Nicholson, Jeff Locke, Bruce Whistle, Misty Hollis, Gary Turner, Jamie Lopeman, and Ron Oler. If you have a question for them, 973-8587. Send us an email, wctv@wctv.info, or send us a tweet at WCTV-info. There were two of you here who voted against last year's budget, basically because I think, as I understand it, you were not happy with the fact that the union contracts were not completed before the budget process. And that's not the first time that has come up. As a collective group, what conversations are you all having with the mayor, having with the unions right now at the beginning of the year to begin to move this process, to get yourself invited to the negotiations, to be part of that process, so that when we get to August, September for the umpteenth year in a row, we're not, I'm sorry, I don't want to exaggerate, but it is something that has come up almost every year I can think of for the last 5 or 6. So that we don't have that as part of the discussion and everybody knows what's going on. So how are you all getting on the front side of this issue as opposed to on the back side of this issue?
Let's start around and just go around.
Yeah, go around the room.
Let's go around.
Mrs. Hollis.
This is Cruz Nicholson.
I mean, for myself, I talk a lot to the ASME workers. I have been invited to negotiations in the past. There were so many things that I took issue with during the last negotiations that I attended, and I believe that's where we went to fact finding, and it was extremely frustrating for me. I am not happy that we are now, 2017, and I'm not sure, does anyone know yet if they've accepted?
It was under review.
It was under review.
Going for
but
vote.
We're talking 2 years, almost, 3 without a contract
3.
now? 3? And
For ASME.
for ASPE.
Yeah.
And for myself, I am just speaking of ASPE because I have not sat in on negotiations for police or fire or anything like that. But I will say that my frustration led to me being thankful that I was ill for a while because I was so frustrated with some of the things that were going on in the negotiations that, yeah, I was very frustrated. So, and I'm just not going to get into all of that, but.
So has that frustration led you to be able to begin to consider how this body can assist in that process? Or can this body assist in that process?
Well, and I think that having a voice on from someone on this body, I think, is important for. And I may be misspeaking. Like I said, I haven't sat in with police and fire, but for ASME, I know that it is important that they have an ear on city council, so to speak, and I support that. You know, I really do, and I support that, and I would be happy to sit on negotiations again. But when during the 2 year, when we went into the 2 years with no solid contract, so to speak, my frustration was quite high. So yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Salas.
I think we all have individual opinions about this matter.
As most people know, I'm starting my second year on council. Last year, I wasn't involved in any of the union negotiations, nor was I asked to be involved. I do have a union background, haven't been a union member. I've negotiated both government contracts from both sides of the table, and I've negotiated privately when I worked at Ford. But my one opinion, I think the city's main negotiator should come from outside city government. Nothing against the gentleman that was the lead negotiator. I don't know him all that well. But just from my past experience, I think the negotiator should be somebody that's not a co-city employee. I'd be more than glad to assist anywhere I can if I'm asked, because I do have a little experience at it, but I haven't been involved in it at this point.
Now we get to the Republican views.
Oh boy, here we go.
Take it away.
And I think
Take it away.
I think I'll surprise both sides on this.
I don't know that I would be
Because
surprised.
the negotiation is a process.
True.
And it's established. The city picks a team of negotiators, the union picks a side of negotiators, and the rest of us should stay out of it. We weren't the ones. I mean, I don't want the union to feel like they can go any member of council and we're going to negotiate the contract for it, and all of a sudden you got the team on each side and then the 9 members of council being involved. I wasn't one of those that voted against the budget because the union hadn't settled yet. I don't want to put that pressure on the administration that they can't work out a fair deal because they've got a time limitation on it. I think that gives a real bargaining point, a bargaining strength to the other side. If the administration comes in and they offer something ridiculous, it's still got to go through us. We're still in control of the budget. So I think we have, it's a process that's well established. It's regulated by federal laws, and we just need to let it work and stay away from it.
Am I incorrect in my thought process that somewhere either written down or agreed upon, this is actually supposed to be done by a certain time of the year?
Yeah,
You're right.
It's city code. It's city code.
Yes.
Yeah.
City code, I was going to talk
Yeah.
about that. City code says that union negotiations will start at a certain point. City code says that the mayor will appoint an administrator department head to
Yeah.
do the union negotiations, not an outside person. And city code says if they don't reach an agreement within a certain period of time, they go to fact finding. If they
Right.
still don't reach an agreement, they go to arbitration. They still don't reach agreement before the budget process starts. If they can't reach an agreement, it's supposed to stop. And you'll have the contract next year you had this year because you
Yeah,
can't reach an
reverts back.
agreement.
That's right.
But a new mayor last year kind of let those deadlines slide, and that's probably okay. But the past administration all did the same thing for several years. So for the last several years, nobody's enforced those hard dates that are in city code. And this could be done if you just follow the code that already exists.
And
And it would stop before budget season, and there would be no question, because if you don't have a new agreement, then next year your agreement is the agreement you have this year.
And I believe it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it did revert back to the original contract. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I
It
thought that
stays
it
in
did. I
place.
thought-
The current contract stays in
It
place.
stays in place, and
Until new
I
ones are
believe it
agreed upon.
reverted back to the previous year. But I do, with what Mr. Whistle said about, there's this side, there's that side, and that we should stay out of it. And I understand saying that, but I do also believe that ultimately we do vote, and I think that they should be allowed to ask or request that a council member may sit in on the negotiations. Not that we necessarily need to say anything, but just to observe and not necessarily be part of the process, but just to be an observer and listen to what's going on, because they do ask questions.
And what I would say is, I think it was the second year that I came on council, and it was such an argumentative process for the unions to even negotiate with the prior, not this administration, it was the prior administration, that the unions came to a council meeting and said, we're asking you please to observe, because they felt things were not being shared truthfully. I think at that point all of the unions came together and even paid for an auditor to come in and audit the books from their perspective. And I do think it did help when we sat in. Mr. Quinn did, I did, Mrs. Kelly Cruz Nicholson. I think Mr. Lopman sat in as a observer this year on some of those as well. But that was this year. I just think sometimes the employees, they just felt they needed to have another person visually seeing how the conversations were going and listening to how the conversations were going. And it did make a difference from their perspective. This year, I'm going to give credit to the mayor. I mean, he worked really, really hard to listen to all of our concerns around the budget. He worked through the finance committee. He did a lot of things that I would have loved to seen in the prior administration. But those contract negotiations for me were important, and this is why. I mean, I don't see how we can approve a budget and know what our true expenses are and feel confident. We go out touting, oh, it's a balanced budget. Well, not really, not if the negotiations aren't completed. I mean, if you're going to come back to us and ask for additional funding, which has been done with prior administrations, to complete those negotiations, it's not a true budget. And we're not being transparent enough to the public, I don't think, when we're saying we have a balanced budget. But, oh, wait, we need to go to cash balance to pull out money to pay for finish the negotiations. So Mr. Whistle is correct. We are the final body that makes that vote, but this is the one time, the one shot, and the one responsibility that we have in approving a budget and being transparent about it. So that's why that was important to me. But if I look at the 4 previous times I've reviewed a budget and the process, this year was much better. He worked hard, and his staff worked hard to work with us and listen to us through that process. And so I will give him credit in that manner.
This was the easiest budget since I've been on city council to approve. I mean, it really was. It was, he put a lot of thought into it. He listened to people. I'm with Misty on that. I do applaud the administration there. So.
I thought it was a great process, my first, but unlike Misty, I feel, based on my business experience, once I've set a budget, it is the budget, and that I have the latitude to deny requests for additional funding. And so I was very comfortable voting that night because we set a reasonable increase for pay for our employees, and we couldn't have afforded more.
Agreed.
And so, to me, it was a decision that was made maybe somewhat backward, but yet it was the decision that was made.
To me, for not voting, because I voted against it, there was two other things that played into this, and President Hollis was spot on, and what she
Now
said,
we get it right?
well,
He's probably Mr. President for a month now.
it wasn't me that did that, though, right?
It was not.
So with that said, there were two other things. We also weren't squared away on insurance,
Right.
Yeah.
and we also were raising our tax rate. So, you know, that's why I was against it. Now,
Yeah.
I was the last council member who sat in on a negotiation, and quite frankly, it brings a calm to the room, I think. The meeting before that, I guess, was less than 3 minutes. It was, I'm out, you're out, let's go, we're leaving. I didn't hear a crossed word the whole time I sat there. I didn't say 2 words the whole time I sat there. It was about a 45-minute meeting, back and forth, was positive, and so I think when you get into the true observing part of it, I think it's okay. We can't interject.
Right.
I mean,
I
that's
agree.
not right, because obviously we would be could potentially be compromising our vote later on. And I think it's an avenue for them, and I think we should have it available to them.
I agree.
Funding has been a conversation over the last number of years, and city finances. The question of what's real numbers, what's not real numbers, who's got the numbers, where are the numbers coming from, what does Umball say, what's in the books, where are the paper, okay. Where are we, city finances, right now, the numbers that are coming, you're getting looks. The numbers that are coming out, one, are you comfortable with the numbers that no, okay, let me back up. Are you seeing numbers on a regular basis? Because that was part of the discussion for more than a year. The numbers that you are seeing, if you are seeing them, do you trust them? And as the legislative body and the body that passes the budget, that's important. And are you comfortable with where the city is with its finances at this moment? We'll go around again. We'll start on this side.
Start with me this time, thank you.
Yep.
Chair of the Finance Committee.
Chair of the Finance Committee.
There we go, perfect start.
At our last Finance Committee meeting, we were informed that the city has not yet closed the 2016 books. The cash balances won't change, but there are adjustments because, as in many departments, some charges have gone to the wrong fund. So the controller is busy trying to correct those. It should not change the balances. It won't change the balances. Just make sure they're charged the right thing before you close the 2016 books. So that should happen probably sometime in February, now that we're on February 2nd. Am I comfortable with the reports we're getting? Yes. Am I comfortable that we lost the assistant controller? No. Am I comfortable that we're going to have a new assistant and controller or use Umball? Yes. We're going to do one or the other. We either get a new assistant controller, do the reconciliations, or hire Umball again to answer the questions, because one person cannot do the job. And you should not ask one person to do the job, because you don't want the one person spending the money reconciling the books too. There's a concern of fraud there. Not saying that person would commit fraud, but it would be easy to do.
Sure. There's checks
So
and
that's why
balances
we
that have
paid-
to be maintained.
That's why we paid Umball so much last year.
Yeah.
So if they don't get an assistant controller hired soon, was fortunate. We worked on the job description for that,
Yeah.
and it was closed last week. Early first part of this week, the job description's in. So I don't know if it's been posted yet. And the salary was
I'm not sure.
moved. The job description hadn't been changed in about 11 years, and even the salary range didn't reflect what's in the current budget for the position, so a lot of things had to change. But hopefully it'll get filled soon, and I think we'll be somewhat okay. Well, I have to say that. Here's what happened a couple of years ago.
Yes, no, yes, no.
Somewhat okay.
A couple of years ago, the new controller wasn't able to reconcile some things because some money wasn't showing up. Because a New York bank where the health insurance fund is being forwarded was sending the statements to the old controller's email, which no longer exists, was going to some cave somewhere. So the controller at the time didn't know we had this much money sitting in this bank. So those kind of weird things happen because we're in this strange point in time where you don't get your statements mailed to you, you get them emailed to you, and if it's emailed to the wrong person, and the new person doesn't know they're expecting it, they don't know what's missing. But now going forward, we've had somebody in there long enough that I think we're getting true numbers.
Yeah.
And I hope it stays that way. So I hope the new controller, if she's listening, has gone to those banks and made sure that they have her email address instead of the past ones, so that she's getting the statements on time. It's back to, finding the jobs are out there. I'm on these jobs lists
Right.
because I advise students for jobs, and I get 20 a day in Richmond area, and I get more than that in the community through a couple of web boards where jobs are posted. It's not in the paper anymore, so
Yeah,
it
Yeah,
takes
it's true.
time, and you just
Yeah.
have to be connected, and the stuff's out there.
it's true.
So I think Dr. Oler hit every point imaginable in the conversation. So being new, I kind of defer to the 5 sitting previous counselors because, it's not what, they had the past. They were able to see what was going on there. In the business world, I'm used to a little higher level of detail, but, I think the information is there.
Yeah, what he said.
Good
Around a year.
answer.
Well, yeah, I look at Mr. Whistle, and how long have you been on city council?
Grandpa here.
21 years.
Yeah, we call him Grandpa. So he's had much more of the experience of what probably it should look like or has looked like in the past. I was, I think the first year with Tammy Glenn, I felt comfortable, confident about where we were when the transition happened, when we weren't getting finance reports regularly, and then we were expected to go into a budget with no recent data on where we were with cash balances and what had been reconciled, what hadn't been reconciled. It was just shocking that it was okay. You need to trust us. I think one of my favorite quotes was, the money's there, but we don't know if which account it's in. I think that was my favorite quote at one of the meetings. Wasn't that one
Or
of
the
them?
money's there, we don't know which bank it's in.
Yeah, that was another one. And you just sit there, and WCTV's on there, and I got Eric with a sign in the back, change your facial expression, because we're just going, what
He
do
only
you
did that
do?
to me. I could have
No,
sworn
I
he
have
only
the
did
same
that to
thought
me.
that you all sometimes.
Okay,
So,
all
no
right,
problem.
all right.
So from where we were at that time to where we are now is so much better, and the communication is better with that office. I've felt much more confident with the information that we're getting out of that office, and it's regular, it's consistent, much better than what we had during that period of time that we experienced.
Well, it was very unfortunate that we had that computer problem where we lost a lot of information and we were all in the dark. But I am comfortable that that our numbers are good on the bottom line, and I'm not going to stay up nights worrying because something that should have been on line 2110 of the budget's on 2130 of the budget. That we're going to work that out. That's going to be taken care of. I feel that we're in awfully good shape for a community of our size, and the reduction that we've had in property tax income and combination of loss of population. I think the administrations can claim a certain pride over that they've been able to hold things together where a lot of other communities have had quite a bit rougher. So I'm feeling pretty confident about that. On the for the long stretch, I don't know if I am comfortable.
Yeah.
We've in order to make things budget, I think we have deferred a lot of things that we're going to have to pay the piper on someday. Like most communities, we're not up on our road maintenance. We're going to have to look at some long-term expenses like that we talked about earlier tonight. Development land, being able to keep that. At some point, we're going to have to look at raises for employees. I do appreciate the sacrifice that a lot of our employees have made in not getting an increase for several years, and we don't want to lose the good people, and those are the ones that can always find a job, to another enterprise that can pay more. So yeah, I do have some lingering feelings about the future, but I think all in all, the city's done a pretty good job.
Question, what's the biggest thing that you think has been put off that's going to come back to bite you all?
Well, I guess I would include the old Reed building in that, because that's the one that's going to come with the biggest price tag all at one time.
Besides that, is there anything?
No, I think the road maintenance issue, although we have been able to get a lot of funding and we can do big projects, but you know, there's a lot of the infrastructure where we've kept piling asphalt on roads. At some point, you got to take that off and start over. We got a lot of sidewalks that are a hazard to the community, and get our curbing in place and do the things that basically government was designed to do. Police and fire and, you know, things of that nature.
Being able to get the police force back up to full strength, which is a task unto itself.
Yeah, even
So,
though we've done that, I think there's still equipment needs that we've not been able to address. We're not rotating the vehicles like we should. The technology that we should be offering to our department, I don't think we're at, and Mr. Locke would know that better than I would, but in having conversations with our law enforcement, we're still behind in where we should be with technology for our officers. And I think our current chief knows that. I think our current chief is addressing that. He's working with the mayor. He's putting plans together on what we need. So I'm excited about that. But I do think from that perspective, we've got to look at how we've lingered and not provided what we've needed to our mainstay departments that is expected. I mean, people expect a police officer to be there and their car to be able to run, and the same with the fire department.
Hold on to that quote in the booth. We'll play it next week. Jim Branham is actually our guest. Jim
I
Branham.
just complimented him. You better be playing the good stuff, not the bad stuff.
Sheriff Kappa actually will join us next week.
Oh, goodness.
As Gary and Jamie both said, you know, I'm the third new guy on the board, so I'm happy with the information I've been getting in regards to the numbers and the budget and stuff. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I think, you know, for me personally, the information that's been coming to us has been regular, which is actually a very good thing because we didn't have that before. The controller at the time and the controller now were both very open that you can go and I could go and sit down and talk to Sandra if I had a question. She would explain it to me to where sometimes I wasn't able to do that in the past. I actually sat down and had a conversation with our new controller the other day, Beth. And, you know, so I'm very comfortable right now. I think that there are some challenges that they still have to kind of work through, but I'm very, very satisfied right now.
We're down to our last couple of minutes real quickly. Is the city employment right-sized? There had been talk for a number of years that maybe we were still a little heavy on city employees for where we were. You all feel, having looked at the budget, having looked at the numbers, are we where we should be in each one of the departments, or are you all seeing more attrition that should happen?
For the last 12 years, there's been a lot of attrition, and I don't know that any one department is oversized now. We did add 2 new sworn officers to the police department for this year's budget because we felt they needed the help, but I can't say there's one particular department that's oversized because I think all of them have had losses through retirements and attrition that weren't filled during the last 12 years from the last 2 administrations. So,
Right.
But you asked deferred maintenance. I know what you're alluding to, and the thing that Bruce didn't say was Parks Department facilities. Last year, the Wayne County Republican Party donated $5,000 worth of paint and stain and hundreds of man-hours to do that. But we still have buildings that have issues, and that's going to be expensive. So hopefully the new parks superintendent is getting her plan together of what we need to do next because the maintenance has been deferred too long. Some of these facilities, I think, are dangerous.
Yeah, I guess I haven't been worried about parks because I think Denise will find the board somewhere and build it herself at night. I think the Parks Department's in very good hands.
I would have to agree. I would have to agree.
Oh, it is in good hands. I just know
Yeah.
there's a lot of work to be done there. It's been deferred for too long prior to her coming on board.
Just a lot on her plate.
I think I'm going to answer that too. I think there's an ample opportunity with the technology that we have that we should be living in to really look at services being more online. And I know that's being addressed with our new technology director. I know that's being looked at. But that possibly could either redirect the staff that we have into different areas or different departments. But I still feel like we have, we're just still doing things kind of the old-fashioned way.
Right.
And I think there's still new ways that we can serve our citizens with the service that they expect, and include technology in that. And so I still feel there's a lot of improvements that we can make. I don't know if I have the ability to say we have the right people in the right places, or we have too many people here and not enough here. I really look at the mayor to be able to communicate with that. I mean, he is the administrator.
But that is something that you all look at the numbers, you all look
We
at the
do.
budgets, you
We
all
ask those
look
questions.
at each department.
We do.
And it
And
is
in
something
this
that
year's
you all have
budget,
made
we
comments
insisted-
on in the past,
But
that
every-
maybe there should be some shifting.
Look, a great example I appreciate the mayor doing this year, and we talked about it several budget cycles, is combining metropolitan development and engineering. And that got done this year, and I applaud him for making that effort, because for 2 cycles we looked at it. I know that they're looking at the finance department right now, and what is needed, and could we combine another department with that one. So it's happening, and
Yeah,
I think we have ample opportunities.
we are probably right staffed for our automation system as it is now. There
Yeah,
could be
fair.
improvements made, but we're going to have to invest in both the hardware and software
Right.
to get the technology to be able to have a machine do it instead of people do it.
You look like you want to say something.
I think it all starts with KMIs, right? Key measuring indicators. And I think the department heads, and we'll just call them functional leads at this point, should be looking at effectiveness and efficiencies. And I think that's something they should report out on in all their meetings. If they notice there's a gap or an opportunity for an improvement, I think they should bring it up. I think it should be reviewed. And, you could do a 5Y or an 8D on it and see if it's effective.
Real quickly, you've been having conversations, discussions, looking at sanitation and a flat fee possibly.
Sure.
We've only got 2 minutes left to go. How are those conversations with Bill Harris, Elijah Welsh going? What are you finding?
Great question. So the committee, which is myself, Councilor Locke, and Councilor Miller, formulated a list of questions. Those have been given to the mayor. The mayor is in the process of reviewing them and is going to set up a meeting with us to discuss.
Okay. Thank you all very much for being here. You've survived the 90 minutes. Hopefully we can have you all back before your candidates again. Kelly Cruz Nicholson, Jeff Lyon.
She said no.
I saw that.
No.
Misty Hollis, Gary Turner, Jamie Lopman, Ron Oler, thank you all very much for being here. I want to remind you that normally I would be telling you this program will rerun at 10:30 tonight on WGTV Channel 11. That won't be the case. We are still doing maintenance on our video server, so we will get this up on video on demand as early as we can tomorrow, and hopefully WGTV will be back in full operation by this weekend. Next week, we will do the exact same thing for Channel 21. All 3 of our channels have to go through this. So Channel 21 will, beginning next Thursday morning at 8 a.m., be on the bulletin board and go through all of that. I want to remind you that next week's program, we will have, as I mentioned, Wayne County Sheriff Jeff Kappa and Richmond Police Chief Jim Branham will be here at 6 p.m. We should have a 10:30 replay next week for that show. Also want to remind you to save the date for our 21 for Fun, which is coming up the 4th annual Saturday, April 8th. If you haven't been to one, join us April 8th at the IU Student Events and Activities Center. Join us next week, 6 p.m. for another edition of In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.
Hi, I'm Rachel Hughes, host of The Third Sector. Join me this month and my guest, Paris Pegg from Morrison